Hello and welcome to the Nonprofit Leaders Network podcast. Our guest today is Coach AK, who will be sharing with us about the founding and growth of Empower to Play. One of the things Coach AK talks about is how important it is to know your own strengths. Your communication style could be one of those strengths. If you're interested in learning more about taking a DISC assessment, just visit nonprofitleadersnetwork.com/DISC, DISC, as in Charlie.
Welcome to the Nonprofit Leaders Network podcast, where your host, KIRSTEN BULLOCK, interviews nonprofit CEOs and executive directors who share what's working. Show notes can be found at nonprofitleadersnetwork.com. Please add the podcast to your favorite RSS feed or iTunes. Now, let's get on with the show.
Hi, Coach AK. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Kristen. Appreciate being on the call.
Oh, you're welcome. Coach AK, president and founder of Empower to Play, is a social entrepreneur, former professional athlete, and educator who has worked with thousands of students and athletes from around the world. Through his travels to over 30 countries, he uses the power of sports to bridge communities and identify and link next-generation youth ambassadors around the world. You can read AK's full bio on the podcast page at nonprofitleadersnetwork.com. Coach AK, could you share a little bit with us about Empower to Play?
I'm the president and founder of Empower to Play, and what we do is we do sports diplomacy. So we use sports as a tool to bridge communities and foster cross-cultural relations, and we also do it to identify next-generation leaders through our sporting events. And then we link them together to create this one big global family philosophy.
Great. And how long have you been involved with Empower to Play?
Well, yeah, that's a funny question because Empower to Play didn't start because I said I had this idea to start this organization. It started 3 years ago, and I had a friend that was living in the Philippines. And my background, I was, an All-American athlete in college. Ran track and field and played football at the University of Oregon. And so I've always had a sports background. So I literally just picked up a bag full of footballs, flew to the Philippines, and literally in 48 hours, the community came together and we created this first camp. That was 3 years ago. And it's funny because right now, actually tomorrow, I actually fly out to Haiti to do a sports diplomacy event with the State Department to use American football in a place called Cité Soleil, Haiti. And we're using this live virtual reality technology. So I've been doing it for 3 years, but full time for 1 year. Great.
And while you were starting it, while the things were all coming together, did you ever wonder why me?
Interesting question. No, because I think I was, I think it came to a point where, because I never planned it to be that way, that I was always kind of just in awe of the process. It's working. How is it working so well? Even though it seems so impromptu. And then it came to a point that's actually a weird thing is the longer that I've been doing the work, we've been able to work with, hundreds of students kids around the world in some impoverished communities. We've provided scholarships, and I've seen a lot of things working in some of these communities, or some of these impoverished communities. And it comes to a point where I actually have to disassociate. So, for example, when kids are coming up to me, like, "Oh, AK, thank you so much for what you've done," or the organization has done, or I see some of the things that I've seen, I'm like, "Who's this Coach AK character? I don't know who you're talking about. I don't know who you're talking about." So, the reason what happens is because when I have to disassociate, if I was fully present in the work that we do all the time, I would be a baffling baby. I'd be crying all the time. But to do some of the work that I do, I have to disassociate to fully be really, really productive, if that makes sense.
I think it does. And for a lot of people in the nonprofit sector, they're sometimes seeing the worst cases. So being able to, I think that's not uncommon at all. So what's been the easiest thing for you about building an organization? It sounds like in a lot of ways it just came together. Is there anything in particular that stands out?
I would only say it's easy when you look back. I remember when it first started, I was like, I want to start a nonprofit organization or an NGO. And they're like, you need to fill out a 501c3. I'm like, what's a 501c3? What's a tax exempt? What's the 10%? What are all of these? What are you talking about? And so I did all of that myself, like all of those myself. And I remember one time I sat down and just kind of completed all of them. And I'm not even a writer. So, and when I did that, it was challenging. And now when I look back, I'm like, that wasn't all that challenging. But it's one of those things as I've been growing the organization that it's kind of always hard. Right? There's always a challenge to it, but you're also growing at the same time. Right? So it's like lifting weights. It's like at the start, it was hard for me to lift up just a bar. It was so heavy. But now I'm lifting up 300 pounds, we'll say, and it's still heavy. But when I look back to doing that process from the start again, it'd be like, I could do it all day. I could do the bar all day. And, at the beginning, it might have been, what's a 501c3, what's all that, to compare to now, how do I expand into a different market, right? How do I get these strategic relationships and build these strategic partners? So it's still a challenge, but every single day that I'm growing through the process. But when you look back, it becomes easy when you look back about stuff that you thought was hard beforehand is now just commonplace.
So in one of the organizations that I worked, the program staff had a saying that the clients would teach us what we needed to know. It was a youth shelter. And so one day they climbed out the window. And so they learned that they needed to keep the windows latched from the outside. So it sounds like this might be kind of like that, where you go a step, you learn what you need to do, push through, and then it's balancing constant learning because there's always a new stage of growth, a new thing to do. But it seems to be unfolding for you in a pretty natural way.
Natural? I mean, I'm not going to say, it's a challenge. And I would say the biggest challenge is, especially when you do some of the work that we do, I can't just say, it's too hard. I'm going to sell off my shares in the company, the company's finished. We have kids from, around the world that we are working with that have been provided an opportunity. They do not know what we have to do on this side to make sure that opportunity is there for them. So if we sell the organization and the organization is finished, it would affect the communities in which we serve that don't even know what we do on the day-to-day. So it sometimes adds that additional pressure of when things are really, really hard, or when you get that rejection that you didn't expect, or when you're expecting that funding to come in that didn't come in and you think, can I continue to do this? That is really our inspiration and my inspiration. You have these kids that one day woke up, went to a sports camp, and by the end of it, they had an academic scholarship until they reached their aspired profession, right? So for us, we have that obligation to these communities in which we serve to continue that. And so there's really no quitting on our end.
Mm-hmm. Not an option.
Not an option. So that's where it's not been easy, but it's we've hit our hard moments, but we always go back to the mission, right? No, but nothing's easy. Nothing is you've never created great results from something that was easy. It's a challenge. And so, and then, because a lot of these companies were really trying to make a big global impact, we sometimes forget where we started because we're always trying to see where we're trying to go. And we sometimes forget the process that's taken place in these last 3 years or 10 years or 6 months. And so sometimes we need to take a time to really sit back and reflect on some of the work that we're doing, even when we may hit some roadblocks.
So have you gotten better at identifying points at which you celebrate, or taking time to reflect back and see how far you've come? Have you built in, I guess you could call them defense posts? Right.
I need to do a better job of that, to be honest. Because there's a lot of organizations that are doing a lot of great work, and we realize the impact that we need to have. And I have a competitive type nature, and it's not like I'm competing against other companies. It's about really trying to be a solid and strong organization. So I've kind of instilled that into our company and our employees, that they're also the same way, that they really want to continue to grow, continue to make more impact. So sometimes it needs to take somebody within our team to remind us, like, I know we had this setback. I know we just got this big partnership deal, but we still need to remember to celebrate these moments, right? Mm-hmm. Because it seems like we understand the bad moments, but when a celebration happens, we're like, okay, it's expected to happen. We kind of just roll through those. And I think we need to embrace more of the good stuff that happens, as well as reflecting when we're hitting a roadblock. But I think for us, roadblocks have actually been our situation where we've grown the most and learned the most. We actually grow more through our failures than we ever have through our successes.
I would definitely agree with that. So do you have a circumstance that stands out for you, looking back, of a time that was a real obstacle, a real failure, that you learned from and turned it into a learning experience?
I would say that's the mission of our organization. I'll say this, right? Our whole part of our business model changed this time exactly last year, when we had a camp in the Philippines. It was our third camp. And I've already done this camp for 2 years, and this was our third year. And I said, the work that we're doing is really, really strong, but people will not be able to understand it until they can see what we're doing. So we brought some film crew out to document the experience. And I said, there's one thing I don't want. I said, there's one thing I don't want to happen, and that is I do not want rain. I don't want it to rain. Because if it rains, it's going to, the camera's not going to be able to work. I had these nice shoes. I didn't want to get dirty on camera. There was all this stupid stuff. But there was all this certain stuff that I didn't want to happen. And I remember it was the day before, and it was just a beautiful day. And I remember I was telling myself on camera, I was saying, you know what? It's sunny, fantastic weather. And I even said, I'm not even going to knock on wood. I was so arrogant.
Oh, no.
And yeah. So later that evening, it kind of just trickles a little bit, not too much rain. And I remember this very strong because I remember walking outside the next day and trying to find the dry spots on the ground, trying to not get my shoes dirty. But we go to the first day of the camp, and for the morning first 3 hours, it's nice. And then all of a sudden, this black storm cloud comes in, and it just begins to start pouring down rain. And it got so bad that actually at some point I had to, I just got the football that we had and I started throwing them around, and it began this big, slip and slide, all 300 kids running around, playing, having an enjoyable time. And I was like, okay, well, that's fine, because we still have one more day that we can get, we can get these kids to play the game, to learn the sport, to identify the scholars. So I wasn't too worried. Now, I'll say that first day, there was grass, right? There was grass that you can see. The second day, it was literally just a mud pit. So these fancy shoes that I cared about, these tennis shoes, full caked on with mud. My whole body, right? But I realized it didn't bother me, right? And then the second day came around, and I said, the whole thing is that we have to finish these games that we play with these kids, because that's what we're about. We're about empowering communities through sports. And what ended up happening is the day was going fine, and then literally right before the final games were about to decide the winner, a big storm cloud comes in, and it is just monsoon rain and lightning, all over the place.
Oh, wow.
And it was so bad that we had to stop the event. And so everybody was kind of down for a second, and we had a DJ that was playing music at the event, and he ends up turning on some music, and literally at that moment, the 300 kids, the 100 volunteers, the sponsors, everybody that came began to start dancing, embracing, and singing in the rain. And it was a surreal experience. And then we asked everybody, why was that so powerful? And they said, at that moment, there was no rich, there was no poor, there was no coaches, there was no athletes. At that moment, we were all one. And at that moment, I realized that what we're doing is so much bigger. Some of the things I didn't want to happen, the exact opposite happened. And at that moment, our mission changed. Instead of being empowering communities one sport at a time, it became creating a global family one sport at a time. Mm-hmm. And we realized that the sports was more just the vehicle. And I'll say by the end, these shoes, these pants, and everything, what that camp allowed me to do was really, what that camp did for everybody, it kind of take away all of these layers. We'll say the clothes you wear, where you're coming from, and realize that no longer matters. This sport allowed us all to be on the level playing field and see each other for who we truly were. So in our biggest failure actually happened to be our biggest success and change our whole entire mission. And so our mission is very much mission driven. We don't try to force anything. We just kind of let things happen and just trust the process.
Mm-hmm. And grow a global family in the process.
Exactly. Right. Because maybe when you have that idea, maybe what you're thinking about organizationally is smaller than it can possibly ever go. And sometimes you're being tugged in a certain direction, and all you have to do is just simply listen and trust the process.
And so often we try to force things instead of just letting them develop as they will.
Exactly. 100%. I would say that's one of the biggest things that we've learned as an organization is trusting the process. Yeah.
That would be a hard thing for a type A driven leader to try to do, I would think.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. And I realize if we're getting resistance in some particular area, we don't push it too much, right? We always say there's a time for that, or it's just not ready at this time. But we do know when an opportunity does present itself, we do act fairly quickly, right? So when the virtual reality component came on, we realized this is a good way for people to actually experience our event. So we're actually going to have live VR 360 technology at our event in Haiti, which starts shooting actually in 2 days, where people can actually use through headsets and experience what we're experiencing in this location to help connect and bridge communities around the world. Now we have technology to do that. If you talked to me 6 months ago, this was never part of the picture. We never thought about it. When it was presented to us, we act quickly, and we thought it fits our mission exactly. Like, this was never part of our 5-year strategic plan. So you have to, at some point, realize when do you have to diverge off that path, still keeping your same mission, but being flexible.
Right. So how did this opportunity present itself? If you're at liberty to share that.
Yeah. I mean, I will talk about it. I mean, for us, it was someone on my team, my marketing director, there was an article just about the VR piece, and I knew nothing about it. And we are going into a place called Soleil in Haiti. It was actually ranked by the UN one of the most dangerous neighborhoods in the Western Hemisphere, and it's also one of the most dangerous places in the world. And I'm traveling there tomorrow, actually, to do this event. And so we realized that people, and I remember we were thinking about, how are people going to experience this event when they really don't have access to get there? And it seemed like it was almost serendipitous. At the same time, this article came up about the VR piece. And it seems ever since we've made that decision to move forward, people have just come into our path to be able to do this. So we're partnering with two companies called Live U and Live It Now, that's going to be able to help broadcast this event worldwide in 360 VR. Just came. I can't tell you. There's no process. It was just being open to ideas, and when you have these ideas that are presented to you and you fully believe in it, things will present itself to you. And I'm a firm believer in that. Is trusting the process, and if it's really towards your mission and purpose, these opportunities will present themselves.
Great. So let's change direction a little bit and talk about funding, because funding something like this, I'm sure it takes a lot of money, a lot of different sources. How did you come up with the idea? How did you initially fundraise to support what you're doing, and how has that evolved and changed?
Well, I would say maybe I wonder. I think most probably individuals that start an NGO nonprofit are probably coming from more of a similar space where they have a passion and they say, I'm going to start this. My only experience in the nonprofit sector is my experience running one. So it was hitting against a whole bunch of walls at the beginning. We worked on private, but I would say for us, our most successful one has been through working with corporations, with companies, strategic partnerships. I believe that with an organization, especially if you want to expand, you have to think and consider multiple different funding opportunities, right? Right now, everybody knows that you can always go through the grants routes or the private route, but if you're able to find ways of opening up to, working with companies or corporations, that will really open you up. But it's also having to be able to think about the work that you do from two different lenses. One of them is obviously through the philanthropic lens, and the other one is through the corporate lens, and being able to have those conversations, understanding what you have in your toolbox and understanding what tool you need to get the job done. So that has been one of them. I would say the roadblocks at the beginning was, I think funding right now is tough sometimes. It is. You have companies on the bigger scale, I'm not going to say any names, but when there's a scandal or a situation that comes out with some of these bigger organizations, it's a trickle-down effect. It's harder for other organizations to raise funds when if there's ever a black cloud in the particular space, So for us, what we've always had to do is we believe the best way to share our message is through media and videos and images, because that's how we feel that we can show transparency in the work that we do. That helps on the philanthropic side of things. That also helps with the on the corporate side of things. So that is what we've used for funding. We believe media is really strong, and we also look at it from two different lenses of understanding the corporate side of things or the business side of things, and also the philanthropic side.
Great. Thank you. And in closing, do you have any words of inspiration or encouragement for other leaders of nonprofits, NGOs?
Yeah, and this would be the same with NGOs, nonprofits, or for business. It depends on how big or small you want to grow the organization or what your mission is. Ours is a very global mission focused. But I think the most important thing when you start any endeavor is to understand what is in your toolbox before you start, because that is going to be the main driver, the main relationship builder as you move forward in this organization. So using this as an example, my background as an All-American athlete in college, my background working at some of the top independent schools in the world, Phillips Exeter Academy, the St. Paul School, my travels are over 30 different countries. That has been key, even though it may not be directly involved solely with my mission. But when you're having a conversation with an individual and they're saying, what is your product, especially if you're new, you have to understand you're always starting off on the bottom of the totem pole, right? Because somebody can say, well, I want to work, like I want to work, like currently you can say, well, I have, we've given 5 kids scholarships. Well, they can always say, well, Right to Play is given, thousands of scholarships. So why don't you work with them or support them? So you're always going to be compared to that. But if you say, well, within my toolbox, I have, the Celtics on board, and I have these people on board, and these are the networks that I have, they're going to be more receptive. We have to think about what we bring to the table more than just on the philanthropic side, because there's so many philanthropic organizations out there. You have to understand what you have in your own toolbox that's going to help you build relationships with the people that you need to build relationships with to move your mission to the next level. And you also have to understand that's also one of your competitive advantages over your competition, is understanding what you bring to the table, because that is what's really going to be bringing trust. And that's what most people are asking when they work with you is, do we trust you? Do we trust that you're going to fulfill your missions? Who do you have on board? What do you bring to the table? What is your story? These are all things that you need to really shape as you move forward and when you start this. And understanding that your idea is good, but you need something and more of a foundation to really help get that to the next level.
Right. So recognizing the unique things that you bring to the table that are different from everybody else.
Right. And that might have nothing to do with your organization. So what you bring. So let's say I have, let's say I'm starting a school, for example, right? And my background is, we'll say, a professional athlete, you can say, right? A school has nothing to do with it. They're going to say, okay, well, this athlete has these types of networks, has these types of social circles, and people want to align with people with good brands, with good stories, with good influencers. You know, why are you going to pick one over another? And it's going to be the inherent stuff that you bring, because there's going to be other organizations that are doing something similar. How are you going to find your way to stand out?
Absolutely. Well, Coach AK, thanks so much for joining me today. And thanks to all our listeners for everything that you do to make the world a better place.
Thanks for listening to the Nonprofit Leaders Network podcast with Kirsten Bullock. If you like what you just heard, we hope you'll check out our prior episodes and that you'll pass along our web address, nonprofitleadersnetwork.com, to your friends and colleagues in the nonprofit sector.